Hi, we are here today to do Rachid Elouahsoussi, a research master student in the Faculty of Humanities, and I'm doing my research with the High Atlas Foundation. I would like to know how this foundation, non-governmental foundation, contributes to shaping future communities in Morocco in concerning the programs that it works on. First of all, the environmental domain. I would like to ask you a few questions concerning this domain. How do you think your projects are contributing, first of all, to tackling the environmental challenges and issues in today's world?
When you say environment, I assume you're meaning more the physical environment, the natural environment, even the ecosystem, and related to that is natural resource management. And so the question is, how are we assisting communities to address those issues that are growing and concerning to them? To begin with, when we start our work with communities by way of an invitation, of course, so they were invited to their communities, to their homes, and that invitation is very important because implicit in that is their desire for not just change in their lives, but change driven through their participation. And so when we have that initial conversation, we really don't go in thinking in terms of environment or agriculture or health or education or youth or women's empowerment. We really go in wanting to listen and understand the challenges as they feel them and express them. And so naturally, working with rural communities, issues related to the environment will arise. And so, and they arise and they are defined in different ways according to the circumstances that they face, whether it's in the Sahara or in the mountains or in a hillside or an arid area or a semi-arid area or an area close to the Mediterranean or the Atlantic, or so there are a range of circumstances and therefore differing environmental challenges that come up. Yes. Now, in the mountains, it's most often in the form of erosion, and I would even call it devastating levels of mountain erosion that is continuing unabated through years and maybe even getting worse. Yes. And so what are the solutions that they identify? Terracing, building gabions, fruit tree agriculture, education, training, capacity building, systems or processes whereby communities come together and make decisions and plan actions in order to improve their environmental conditions. And so really we work in all of those project areas I just described. Okay. And we are doing all of that now, and in different regions. But I think what's important is that we don't decide gabions and where, and we don't decide fruit tree agriculture and what kind of trees, well, as long as they're organic and do not require the application of pesticides and so forth. And also the terracing and locations and, the systems of management that they end up determining for themselves. So we really just assist their dialogue in the directions that they want to go, helping them prioritize the projects they most want.
Exactly. Concerning you talked about these projects and their efficiency. For example, what is the added value do you think in the last years of these environmental work in mainly the rural areas that the foundation did?
The added value. One of the good things about this approach is that there are short-term benefits, medium-term benefits, and long-term. And that usually that the long-term benefits are accelerate or they're compounded. So, for example, the Cadi Ayyad Foundation since 2014 engaged 530 schools in 24 provinces in environmental education activities. These are with primarily primary and secondary schools, but also high school students. And so we also know, having done evaluations of these efforts, that the days that we go there and that we plant trees with them and we talk about wind energy and how to grow trees in an organic way and what trees in Morocco grow organically, and when we do a range of interactive, fun, informative activities with these young people, that it's unforgettable, that they remember these days even when it happened a year ago or two, that it remains a very poignant, important memory.
So environmental education.
Environmental education. Now, it's important. Those trees are there and they're growing and they bear fruit, and we have reports that some of that income helped to buy glasses for reading and shoes and backpacks and all this. Okay, that's great. But I also think about 5-10 years from now, when these students have to make decisions about what trees to grow on their farms, that they'll remember these days. And so, but we've also planted more than 3 million fruit seeds and trees with many thousands of farming families. And so as trees mature, their yields increase. And we also focus with them on processing, or almond oil, or other kinds of value added to these raw product. And so again, these are compounding or accelerating income generating initiatives, and so they're good today, but they get better with time.
Exactly. For your aspirations in the future, how do you see yourself as an NGO in the future, and what gaps or areas you would like to improve on for the future working on environment?
In regards to environment, now, with every action I just told you requires partnership building, proposal development, securing finances from inside Morocco, from the United States, from European agencies. And so now the need is great. The need of rural Moroccan communities is major. And in order to benefit as many people as possible, we need to create a financial generating revenue system beyond traditional forms of raising revenue through proposal development and contributions, although that's important, and we're committed to that. But what other mechanism can we create that allow for even greater investment, for engaging more people in communities and schools and families? And so in that regard, in the question about the future, we see the potential income from the monitoring, certifying, and sale of carbon credits based on the trees that the foundation planted with its community partners. that is a hugely important input that will allow us to do much greater work. And also the focusing on value added and processing and organic sales in that regard, which allows for reinvestment in the cooperatives and so forth. And so, we are about people's participation in development, and having better and better methodologies for that is also an area where we want to continually grow and improve. But the question that we have is that what will financially enable the growth? And so we're focused a lot too on those mechanisms that allows us to go to scale, because Morocco has created a society, as policies and laws that allows growth at all levels. It wants people's participation in development and localizing control and projects that emerge from the people. And so how do we do this in greater spaces? Our future involves developing mechanisms for us to do that.
For concerning women's empowerment and engagement, you concentrate a lot on these programs. First of all, concerning the background of women's empowerment, how do the social stereotypes and challenges concerning women stand like as a barrier for you to empower these women, mainly in the rural areas?
Let's of course acknowledge that patriarchy is a global system.
Yes.
And it's rooted in millennia of manifestations and evolution and forms of control. And so what we describe in Morocco is not, of course, exclusive to Morocco, although the actions to address this particular form of social control needs to be Moroccan. So the challenges that we see are related to education, the fallout in girls' education from primary to secondary and from secondary to high school in rural places is precipitous. And one of the most sad and tragic aspects of our work is realizing and seeing young people with their infinite potential not be realized and developed. It's crushing in that regard. The allowance or freedom of women to leave their village, to leave their home, to not have forced or early marriages under the age of 18, which is 18 is the legal age for marriage, and yet it's still occurring at 17 and under, and then some statistics show that it's occurring at increasing rate even with Mudawana, which is Morocco's codified statutes that promote the status and liberation of women and girls. The level of confidence that society or cultures may show toward women's development and growth and opportunity can be limited and not forthcoming and not encouraging. After all, we've heard it said in different ways, but that if men weren't able to complete their education and have a successful cooperative, well then how can women and girls do that? And so there's not the kind of reinforcement that we need in order to succeed and grow. And so all of these things and more come into play in the lives of women and girls. What we do is that we focus before we talk about cooperatives, or they do, and development and projects, which is in livelihood and health and education and all those things, which is hugely important and the direction we're going. But before we, get into that prioritizing and analysis and effort, we focus on our own self-discovery, our own view and consideration of the relationships in our lives.
Yeah. Personal development.
Personal development. What are my barriers in my day that I experience that may hold me back from achieving my own personal growth? What's my relationship with money and work and spirituality and these different areas of life? And so we have a 4-day, 32-hour workshop called Imagine. We do it in partnership with the Empowerment Institute in the United States, but we incorporate Moroccan Mudouana, Moroccan liberating statutes and laws and human rights. We integrate human rights into our discovery approach. After all, if our relationships are hurtful, emotionally, physically, we need to know our legal recourses in order to address that. And so naturally we would integrate human rights as part of the empowerment experience. And so going through that and identifying our affirmations and building our inner strength and determination to know the changes we want and to actually pursue them is really an important initial first experience in order for us to effectively build cooperatives and pursue development projects. And we learn this through experience.
So concerning your last point, you are exactly empowering women through entrepreneurial projects, for example, cooperatives. How efficient is it, do you think, that this approach is important? Like empowering women at the personal level, first of all, for their lives, that can of course impact their children's life at our school and their families, and also at the professional level, so they can gain qualities like innovation, independence, etc.
It's a good question. For a lot of years, we focused on women's participation in decision making. That if only women were part of the discussion surrounding the projects for their community, then those projects will naturally respond to their self-interest, to what they want most in their lives. And what we found was that women oftentimes voted or made decisions that contradicted what they wanted in their hearts. That they felt a certain way amongst themselves in their own understanding of an issue. They've come to a certain decision or determination. But when it came time to coming together with all the cooperative members, including men, they voted or sided with the male president or the male members of that cooperative. And we said, you know what, we need to take a step back from this. That participation in decision making is positive, but not enough to ensure that we act upon what we most want. And so that is really what made us require this 4-day self-discovery, personal analytical experience in a group, with a group of women doing the same, offering support and reflection and encouragement to each other. And so it's really key aspect of sustainable development. But let me just say this too, we are committed, we've always been, but we are now training our staff our male staff to be facilitators of this gender empowerment experience, so that they can then implement these workshops with men in villages and city neighborhoods. So it's key. But again, it's key in and of itself. I mean, the means are the end, in a sense. How we do this is important in and of itself. But we seek a success that involves livelihood and income and better health and better schools and prosperity and uplifting all community members in tangible, measurable ways that enhance their lives. And so going through this self-discovery experience and then getting into cooperative building and the projects that you described really lends toward sustainable success is what we will. We want income that endures. We want health that is now and always. We want schools that have water and bathrooms and the infrastructure needed to make sure girls attend. And so, and to have that always. And if things do not work as intended, the relationships are there for people to come together and rework it and redesign it and make it. But that initial empowerment workshop experience is essential for that project sustainability that we all seek.
The third program I think that you are concentrating on is cultural diversity in multiculturalism, promoting that. What is the importance of the Moroccan context, in your opinion, as a bridge between cultures and civilizations in promoting cultural diversity?
Morocco, there's a lot of international, and it's rightful, and it's fair, and it's just, and it's good, but there's a lot of international attention brought to Morocco about its multiculturalism and interreligious solidarity and interfaith, interculturalism, and particularly we think about the Muslim, Christian, Jewish, and I think it's, yes, coexistence, but really, if there's a stronger word, that's why I use the word solidarity. There's a recognition and acknowledgement and appreciation, and so and it's historical. And it's not always like all relationships in the world, especially these that are complex and emotional and deeply rooted and inseparable from identity. There are always times in history where they are challenged or even strained, and But Morocco is exceptional in this regard, and even with a complicated, sometimes, periods in the past. Now, the question is, though, what makes Morocco, I think, even more exceptional in this regard is the fact that there's statements by His Majesty the King that says that this bridge of intercultural dialogue should ultimately lead toward human development, development.
That's exactly my point. How do you advance those cultural activities in human development?
Yeah, well, let me, and sometimes we think it's more complex and not commonly achieved. And I think it's deeper than just saying, let's restore a synagogue and now promote tourism. Yeah. That's a little, it's obvious. And it's not necessarily community driven. We sit with villages all the time that see the passage of tourists, and yet they may not prioritize tourism projects as something as viable to them, and which is a very fine thing to do. But you know, thinking that if we just generated tourism out of that would achieve what the framework that His Majesty had set out, I think is not really realizing the hugely strategic, creative, developmental opportunity that's being presented here. So one of the things that we do is that Morocco, in the case of agriculture, Morocco needs 1 billion trees. It's transitioning from barley and corn to more lucrative cash crops, and that's putting huge demand on fruit trees, and thankfully in Morocco there are 13 that grow organically. Okay. Now, we're given land by the Moroccan Jewish community next to their cemeteries in order to grow fruit tree nurseries for farmers of that region. Now, we didn't think of fruit tree nurseries. It comes out of community meetings. Farmers can't give up their land for 2 years in order to grow a nursery, seeds to a sapling, and so we need the contribution of land. And so here we see land of the Moroccan Jewish community near their village, and so that lending of land is actually essential for farming families to break this systemic rural poverty. We need trees, we don't have land for a nursery, give us the land, we're growing now trees, and we can get beyond this systemic approach to growing barley and corn. Now, that is far more impactful and deep and sustainable than simply as, again, it's great that they're restoring synagogues and, you know, hoping that tourists come, and, you know, that's fine. But I think the call of the King of Morocco to integrate interfaith toward human development is much more, has greater meaning than simply restoring religious sites.
Concerning the future, would you like to improve in this level of cultural diversity in the future as a foundation?
One of the things that we're seeing around the world is how, because cultures are challenging each other, and that matters of solidarity seem to be shaken, the Morocco model is standing out more and more around the world. And maybe that's why more attention is being brought to it. And so when I think about the future, now there are 600 parcels of land of the Moroccan Jewish community around this country. And we've planted on one, and we're close to planting on a second, and you know, if they were all planted and all the potential was realized, we're talking about many tens of millions of trees a year, which means that the Moroccan Jewish community, which has only 2,000, 2,500 people, can actually play a national role in the country overcoming its rural poverty. So it's not just, you know, a one-off nursery next to a cemetery and there it is, nice. That it's actually a nationally strategic decision to do this. And that's the future. The future is not single projects, but how do we bring this kind of approach to scale to actually make change on a national level. And interfaith and interculturalism, Moroccan multiculturalism, can actually be a key for that. It's an important part of ending rural poverty, Moroccan multiculturalism. But the question is, how do we manage it, and how do we do it, and how do we invest, and you know, and use that example to inspire other countries in a similar way.
So thank you very much for these good answers, for your work on these 3 programs. Thank you very much.
We're done? We're done. Elias, you say something, or well, maybe we'll ask Rachid something. what makes these topics interesting to you?
I think they are, for me, like the foundations of a very strong community culture at one level. Women, because we need them, they are very important in playing a very important role in the human development of this country. And on the other hand, environment, because environment means continuity of life on this earth at the international level.
I'm thinking, you said culture, women, environment. Is there a thread or a connection between the three?
Yes.
How would you describe it?
For example, concerning women, first of all, they play a very important role in the development of this country. How? For example, if you have an educated, empowered woman who can raise an educated girl or a boy who is responsible towards his community in the environment, that is very important on the one hand. Culture, on the other hand, is very important because we need cultural understanding, control, and coexistence in our country more than before. We know that the world of today is mainly characterized by geopolitical conflicts that have no boundaries, and we need that strong coexistence in the face of these threats. That's on the other hand. Of course, when you have empowered women, and of course the impact their families and their entourage, if we can say, they are of course responsible towards their environment, protecting, for example, in Tassawi again, we have women at the same time attending workshops with their school children who realize that their environment, that forest that surrounds their village, is very important for their living and for that project of women, for example, in that cooperative. And when they go outside, for example, collecting waste, and they go to the river and do the same, this awareness is like embodied in their personality.
Yeah, you know, one of the things you remind me of is that in development, you know, sometimes we look at the agricultural value chain, nursery, cooperative building, organic certification, processing, sales, commercialization, all of these activities, and they're all essential. But sometimes, you know, we don't have to work from A to Z. We can start at M and then go to Q and then go to C and then go to A. That meaning that we can start with cooperative building and then build out.
Exactly.
Or we can start with an order for purchase and then use that order for purchase in order to support actions prior to that, irrigation, nurseries, and so forth. And so one of the things when we say we can start, for example, a cultural, multicultural initiative as we did in Akrish.
That's very important. For example, I think it's very innovative when you work on culture in the same environment. You are like joining two communities of the same country towards one goal, that is a human development.
Well, but on a yes, and on a practical level, when we do multiculturalism, it is leverage in order to engage women. Yeah. And when we engage women, we use that as leverage in order to engage schools and the environment. So the integration, we can begin on any point. And the challenge in development is, how do we use that one project, whether women's empowerment or environment or agriculture or health or clean water, whatever it may be, how do we use that project in order to leverage new partnerships and new support to do another initiative? And that's why development is a strategic, creative, mind challenging experience, because we always have to think of how do we use this in order to achieve this. How do we, if we have $100 for women's empowerment, how do we use that to raise another $100 for environment? And it becomes much easier if you're able to start with anything to use that to raise something else. The biggest challenge is to have that first initiative, that first project from which we can then leverage. But once you start, once you enter into that value chain, once you begin with an initiative anywhere along the way, you're really off and running. And so that's often, that to me, if you're looking for a profession that requires that constant thinking in ways of how do you build outward from how do you make 1 into 10, into 50, into 100, development really gives you that constant challenge and need. It really is critical. How do you grow from 1 province from when we started to 24 provinces? How do you leverage that 1 province to 2, to 4, to 8, to 20, to 24? And how do you, within each one, how does it become women and youth and agriculture and health and education and all those things? It's this constant building from a start into more and more and more. Leverage is key. Okay, thank you all.